For decades, rugby's greatest minds stuck to the script. That was until Rassie Erasmus came along and rewrote the playbook, the Bomb Squad, a strategy so brilliant it has helped the Springboks win 2 Rugby World Cups in a row and sparked global outrage. The critics claim that it is unethical. But is it really? In this episode, you are going to get a front row as I blow the lid off the controversy, celebrate the strategy of the Bomb Squad, and expose the haters. But before we get started, let's talk about what the Bomb Squad actually is. Well, it's quite simple really. It's just a colloquial term for the replacements bench in a rugby match. Now, in the old days, when rugby first turned professional after the amateur era, you were allowed to have 6 replacements on the bench. And most coaches would go with 3 forwards and 3 backline players. That was the conventional wisdom at the time. A few years later, it was expanded to 7 players on the bench, and almost every coach on the planet would go with 4 forwards and 3 backline players. So you can already see that pretty much everyone was on board with thinking that we need to have more forwards on the bench compared to backline players. Later, this was expanded from 7 to 8, and almost every coach on earth went 5-3 as their split. And then Dr. Rassie Erasmus rewrote that playbook by coming up with the 6-2 split. That was in and around the time of the 2019 Rugby World Cup in Japan, and a lot of people looked at this and they felt uneasy about it. Some looked in awe, others looked in disgust. The players themselves loved the strategy so much that they came up with the nickname the Bomb Squad. The whole idea, it's actually kind of ironic because in real life the Bomb Squad are the guys who come in to defuse the situation, right? But in rugby, the Bomb Squad are the guys who go on and add to the spark, add to the fire, cause something of an explosion. Now, Rassie took this one step further in the Qatar Airways Cup match last year against the All Blacks, when Willie Leroux pulled out of the match quite late with an injury, and it meant that the Boks went with a 7-1 split. And yes, there were a lot of people who freaked out in that moment. Jacques Nienaber, who was our coach at the time, opted to go with this strategy again in the pool stage match against Ireland, and again in the final against the All Blacks. Of course, a lot of pundits lost their minds. How dare we do this? Matt Williams, the Australian who once coached Scotland, said that what the Springboks were doing was not against the laws, but he questioned whether or not it was ethical. According to Williams, substitutions should only be for injuries. Now, I'm not sure if he is aware of this, but that's how it was in the amateur era. We are now in the professional era, and rugby has been a professional sport for nearly 30 years. But perhaps most annoyingly, the Welsh rugby writer Stephen Jones, you may have heard of him, wrote a column a few weeks ago criticizing our Bomb Squad and called for an end to what we are doing. In fact, he went so far as to say that what the Springboks do in terms of their replacements should be outlawed. Let me rehash his article for you if you weren't able to read it. Well, the first thing that he argues is that there shouldn't be 8 replacements in rugby. Of course, the irony there is that World Rugby's own studies have shown that it is a good thing to have 8 replacements. Let me explain. Our very own Professor Ross Tucker was part of the team that put together this study at World Rugby in looking into player safety. Now, as you will know, World Rugby are currently obsessed with player welfare, particularly when it comes to head injuries. And what the study found was that the more replacements you have, the fewer injuries you have. Now, my wife will tell you that she could have told you that when she was in high school, but let me explain in greater detail. So what happens is, obviously, you are running into other men for 40 minutes. You take a sort of 15-minute break these days, then you come back on for another 40 minutes, okay? And obviously, you now have fatigued bodies in that second 40-minute period. By bringing on fresh legs, you keep people fresher, and that reduces the risk of injury, because obviously the more tired you are, the more likely you are, or the more susceptible you are to injury. The contrast to that, of course, like Eddie Jones would have said, is that the more fatigued you are, the more space opens up in the last 20 minutes, especially of a match. And that's when you start getting people scoring tries, running past other opponents and that sort of thing, which is all fine and well. But if we're going to be obsessed with player safety and player welfare and head injuries, well, then it makes all the sense in the world that you would want to have fresher bodies on the pitch at all times, as more as possible. And so with that in mind, I don't think we're going to go back to 7 or even 6 replacements. We're more likely to have 9 replacements. And you would think that a man like Stephen Jones would know this. And so with that in mind, how about some more irony? The former World Rugby chairman, Bill Beaumont, is another man who wasn't really a fan of the Springbok bomb squad. Let's have a look at what he had to say in an interview a few weeks ago. My view is that we allow too many substitutes. I don't know if I'm looking through rose-coloured spectacles, but in years gone by, the game always opened up in the last 20 minutes, and games were often won in the last 20 minutes. Contradicting his own organisation's report. You can't make this stuff up, can you? Seemingly, men like Beaumont, Jones and Williams are against player safety. And another man who has decided to weigh in on the matter is former All Blacks coach Steve Hansen. Now, you may have caught my video earlier in the week where I highlighted the comments that he made in terms of the All Blacks being robbed in the 2023 Rugby World Cup final. And now the former Kiwi boss says that the Springboks are very beatable, and he's had a little bit of a dig at our bomb squad as well. Let's take a look at what Hansen had to say. They rely a lot on their big men, and if they lose some of those big men, have they got big men to replace them? So far, they have. So it seems Hansen doesn't care much for our bomb squad either. Now, he's also referring there not only to the players on the field and having players that can come on to replace them like for like, but I think also the idea that a lot of the Springbok players currently are on the wrong side of 30 and they may or may not be able to make it to the 2027 Rugby World Cup. But having said that, Rassie Erasmus has done a brilliant job in terms of creating depth or building depth. We used 51 different players this year. He mixed and matched his teams throughout the year, a year in which we won the Rugby Championship, beat the All Blacks twice, and went unbeaten on our end-of-year tour. Now, having said that, I don't have a problem with what Hansen says when he claims that the Springboks are beatable. And the reason is because I think that our rivals should believe that they can beat us. We want them to believe that they can, even if we don't think that there's a lot of merit in what they have to say. For what it's worth, someone the other day actually joked that the Springboks are the #1 team in the world, as per the World Rugby rankings, and the Springboks B team is the second best team in the world. It really is a very exciting time to be a Boks supporter. So what do you think? Do you think that men like Williams, Beaumont, Jones and Hansen have a point to make? Do you think that the Springboks bomb squad strategy is unethical, or do you think they should all just shut up and they are just jealous of what we're able to do? I'd love to know what you think. Let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, you might notice that there's a heart button with a $sign inside of it. That's called Super Thanks. If you're enjoying my content and would like to support me with a small financial contribution, you can hit that button. It'll allow you to make a highlighted comment on the channel. I promise to reply to it and hit the heart button, and the little donation will be something like $1, maybe $5, $10, $100, up to you, whatever it is that you're comfortable with. And the idea is that I want to save money and use the money specifically from things like Super Thanks and head on over to Australia in 2027 and cover the Rugby World Cup for you with daily content from down under. Another way that you can support me is you can spear tackle the like button down there. You can also subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so. Now, as mentioned, I did do a video regarding Steve Hansen's comments about the Springboks and how the All Blacks were robbed, or at least allegedly robbed, in the 2023 Rugby World Cup final. You can go watch that video. It's appearing on your screen over here. I also mentioned that the Boks used 51 players this year in what was a fantastic year for the Springboks in 2024. I've done a video about that. You can click on that over here and watch it, and I will see you next time.